All right, today we're going on a trip, a big one, 4 billion years into the past. We're going to be detectives trying to piece together the clues to solve one of the biggest mysteries out there. Where did life itself come from? And our whole investigation, it kicks off with the code that's running inside every single one of us right now.
You've seen this shape a million times, right? The DNA double helix. It's the blueprint for literally everything, from a tiny bacterium to a massive blue whale. But this beautiful molecule is more than just a blueprint. It's a historical document. It's our biggest clue for unraveling a story that's 4 billion years old. So let's dive in and figure out how it actually works.
Now, before we fire up the time machine, we really need to get a handle on what this code is doing in the here and now, inside your own cells. How does something that's basically a blueprint turn into an actual functioning building? Here's the really mind-bending part. All the complexity of a living cell, this buzzing, three-dimensional little city, it all springs from a simple, one-dimensional line of code written in DNA. The entire miracle of life is basically just translating that 1D information into a 3D reality. So how does that translation happen? Well, it's a process that biologists call the Central Dogma. First up is translation. A specific gene on the DNA gets copied into a temporary message called messenger RNA. Just think of it like photocopying a single page out of a gigantic instruction manual. Next, in translation, a little cellular machine called a ribosome reads that RNA message and it starts building a chain of amino acids, one by one. And finally, and this is where the real magic happens, that simple chain just folds. All on its own, it twists into a perfect, complex, three-dimensional protein that's ready to go to work. And this shows that final step perfectly. You see the linear strings of code up top, and then bam, they fold into these incredibly intricate, specific shapes down below. It's that final 3D shape that is absolutely critical. That shape determines what the protein does, whether it's carrying oxygen around your body, digesting your lunch, or building new parts of your cells. Okay, so we've got a system that copies this blueprint with unbelievable accuracy. But that brings up a pretty big question, doesn't it? If the code is copied so perfectly, why is there so much diversity in life? Why aren't we all just identical copies of whatever the first living thing was? The answer, and really the answer to so much in biology, is captured in this amazing quote from Theodosius Dobzhansky. The story changes because of evolution. The blueprint isn't set in stone, it's being edited all the time. So how does the blueprint get edited? It happens through something called genetic mutations. Even though the copying process is insanely accurate, every now and then a mistake slips through. A letter in the DNA sequence gets swapped or added or deleted. These tiny little typos are the raw material for all of evolution. Now, most of these mistakes are either harmful or they don't do anything at all. But every once in a while, a mutation gives an organism what we call a selective advantage. So imagine you have the original organism, the wild type, and it's doing just fine. Then a mutant version pops up. If the environment suddenly changes, maybe a new predator shows up or a new food source appears, and that mutant happens to be better equipped to deal with the new situation, it's going to thrive. It'll survive and have more babies, while the original might struggle. That's Darwin's survival of the fittest in a nutshell. Okay, so we're making progress. We understand how DNA works, and we get how it evolves. But this is the point where our detective story slams into a brick wall. A massive fundamental paradox, a real chicken and egg problem at the very heart of the origin of life. Here's the paradox. To copy and repair your DNA blueprint, you need workers. Specifically, you need proteins called enzymes to do the job. But, and this is the kicker, the instructions to build those exact protein workers are stored inside the DNA blueprint itself. So that leaves us with this giant nagging question. Which came first, the blueprint or the worker? You literally can't have one without the other. For decades, this puzzle was a huge stumbling block for scientists trying to figure out how life could have possibly gotten started. But the solution, when it finally emerged, was just so beautiful and elegant. It's a theory known as the RNA world, and it proposes that one special molecule could have broken this deadlock. The whole idea behind the RNA world hypothesis is that before there was DNA and before there were proteins, there was RNA. And the genius of this is that RNA is this incredible multitasker. It can store information like a blueprint, just like DNA, but it can also fold up and catalyze chemical reactions, just like a protein worker. It was the all-in-one starter kit for life.
So you can just picture the scene on early Earth. In this primordial soup, short little RNA molecules start forming. Just by pure chance, some of them have a sequence that lets them make copies of themselves. Well, those self-replicating molecules would start to multiply like crazy. Over time, new versions would show up that could also build simple proteins. And eventually, a much more stable molecule, DNA, took over the main blueprint job, and proteins, which are way better workers, took over the catalyst job. And that left us with the system we see in all life today.
Okay, so we've cracked the chicken and egg problem. Awesome. But our investigation isn't over. That just pushes the question back one step. Where did the building blocks for RNA and proteins, all that stuff in the primordial soup, where did that come from? To answer that, we have to visit the crime scene, the planet Earth, 4 million years ago. Way back in the 1920s, a scientist named Alexander Oparin proposed that the early Earth's atmosphere was a totally different world. It was thick with gases like methane and ammonia, but the really crucial part, there was basically no free oxygen. And that's key because oxygen would have just destroyed any complex molecules the moment they formed. For a long time, that was just a theory, a cool idea. But then, in 1953, Stanley Miller and Harold Urey decided to actually test it. They recreated that primitive atmosphere in a glass flask, they zapped it with electrical sparks to act like lightning, and they just let it run for a week. And the result? It was incredible. They found that organic compounds, including amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, had formed all by themselves. It was the first real proof that the ingredients for life could have just emerged from the raw chemistry of early Earth. Let's just pause for a second and try to wrap our heads around the time scale here, because it's truly immense. The Earth forms 4.5 billion years ago, and what's amazing is that the first chemical signs of life pop up pretty quickly after that, around 3.85 billion years ago. But look how long the next steps took. It was more than 2 billion years before the first complex cells appeared. Evolution's story is written across a stretch of time that is just almost impossible to imagine. So this code, this single language that's shared by every single living thing on this planet, has been writing and rewriting its own story for almost 4 billion years. It's gone from a humble little self-copying RNA molecule to the entire unbelievable web of life we see today. It's a story of pure chance, of chemistry, and of enormous amounts of time. And it leaves us with one last really fascinating question to ponder. What will it write next?